Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for coming. So today I'm going to be talking about the return of wildlife to urban America. And cities today have quite a surprising amount of wildlife in them, but it hasn't always been that way. Cities in the United States have not been wildlife friendly typically. This is a seal from the town of Albany in 1752. It's got a beaver on it. And this wasn't because there were so many beavers in Albany in 752. It was because that's where all the skins moved through for the fur trade. And really, our country was founded on fur. The exploration into the different parts of our country in its early days and leading into the 17 and 1800s was a lot about harvesting wildlife. Here you can see this is from 1920 in upstate New York. And this was not done sustainably initially. It was done without rules, and people were just trying to make as much money as they could. And these, in particular, there's an animal called the fisher that was a favorite. The fisher is, it's in the weasel family. It's a pretty big weasel. It's about the size of a house cat, 5 or 10 pounds. And they had really nice fur, and because they were big, you could make you could make jackets out of them, hats, etc. So in the 1920s, for example, a good fisher pelt could be worth as much as $345 in 1920s dollars, which would be thousands of dollars today. So if you were a poor farmer and you saw fisher tracks running through your land, you went out and tried to get that fisher. And there was no regulation on it. So you can imagine Albany in 1952 had no fishers living in the town border. There were probably no fur bearers of any kind living there at all. And the result of this was that fishers and other wildlife in North America declined across the continent. This shows you the change in the distribution of fishers leading up to about 1930, the low point of the distribution when they were only in the light green area. So they disappeared from almost all of the lower 48 states, surviving in some of the wilderness areas that the trappers couldn't quite get to. So it wasn't that they were prevented from getting there by any rules or regulations, just that it was hard to get into these wilderness areas. And studies of the fishers showed that, at the time and leading up, into the rest of the 1900s, that they required closed canopy forests and that they were really kind of an old growth specialist. This says they were habitat specialists that require mature forest. This was, kind of the textbook of fishers when I grew up and when I was in college learning about the mammals of North America. So you can imagine my surprise when in 2002, I got this camera trap picture of a fisher in suburban Albany, New York, where there hadn't been fishers for hundreds of years. And here was a photograph. So I thought, this is really crazy. This must be some fisher that's moving, from the Adirondacks to the Catskill Mountains or something and is just passing through town. Because this is what suburban Albany looked like in 2002. And this is actually right around where we got the photograph. You can see the neighborhoods, there's Crossgates Mall, there's a university downtown, and there's these little patches of forest in between there, and that's where we got this camera trap picture. So surely this wasn't actually a resident fisher. And I started looking into fishers and learning more about fishers, and in fact, fishers had made a remarkable recovery. This shows you how they had expanded their range back out into new areas through protection of having regulated hunting. So initially, hunting and trapping was eliminated in the 1930s, and then their populations recovered. They started filling the wilderness areas. They started moving into the rural areas. And then some trapping was allowed, but it was tightly regulated in a sustainable way. But really, did we really have suburban fishers? So to really find out, what were these animals doing and were they really there? My student Scott LaPointe and I did a study using some high-resolution tracking collars. By the way, she's tranquilized or she'd chew his hand off. They are fierce predators. Fishers are one of the only animals that can regularly kill porcupines. They are very aggressive to rodents, for example. And we found when we ran camera traps in the suburban forests and also out in the state park outside of town, which is a much more wild area, we actually got way more pictures in the urban area. There was tons of fisher activity in these forests. So our GPS tracking data showed us exactly where these animals were going. We got some really nice tracks showing how they were using the area. In this case, the Mohawk River was frozen, and so it was moving back and forth over an open river. There's no closed canopy. If you look up on the left, there's the Schenectady Airport. The animal cuts right across this open airport area. And if you look some of these restrictions where it crosses that main road. We thought, why is he going to exactly the same place to cross the road? And so we put a camera trap there, and here you can see this little half-filled, crappy drainage culvert that is a tunnel that these weasels love tunnels. And so he's going through this tunnel back and forth. This is Leroy, the fisher. You can see he's got his tracking collar on. And so this is how they're basically colonizing the city using this network of tubes. And they're using all sorts of what I call unclaimed habitats at night, right? No one's in the golf course at night except the rabbits and the fishers. And so here you can see all these pink points are GPS locations of a fisher. This is an amazing animal. This is a 6-lane highway, Route 87 and Central Avenue going this way. And he's gone into the little clover leaf of forest that happens to be left. And he's hunting animals. And he's using culverts to cross underneath those access ramps. And then he goes over here, right here, and goes under another culvert to hunt that little tiny strip. And I went there right after we downloaded the data. I was like, what is going on? And I went there, and there was a little cover of snow, and there were so many rabbit tracks in that little strip of forest. This is the kind of place you might expect to see a red-tailed hawk during the day. Fishers are going there at night. Occasionally, they'll cut through neighborhoods. Here you can see a fisher track running across someone's front yard. They're using a variety of different rest sites. They're quite flexible. They use brush piles behind people's houses, garbage piles, holes in the ground, and our favorite was the squirrel nests, these leafy squirrel nests that we called fisher bed and breakfast. Because indeed, they were eating a lot of gray squirrels. So why move to the burbs? It's really good eating. There's tons of gray squirrels there. There's lots of rabbits. So this little pie chart shows what we found them eating. A lot of gray squirrels, a lot of rabbits. They weren't killing deer, but if they could find a deer in the winter, it'd be frozen. They chew on it all winter long. And I think part of this is that prey species colonize the suburbs first, escaping from their predators. This is just a little fun little gif of a chipmunk and a bunny dancing around someone's yard. They went into suburbia first to get away from the predators. And eventually, the predators are moving in, following them in. But fishers aren't the only backyard predator. I want to talk a little bit in the second half of this talk about coyotes. And coyotes are a different story. Now, coyotes have also expanded their range. But unlike the fishers that were reclaiming old territory, coyotes are moving into new territory. And they're doing this after they've actually hybridized, in many cases, with dogs and or wolves. So the coyotes that are now in the eastern United States, they're still mostly coyote. They're 80–90% coyote, but they do have a smattering of dog and wolf genes that seems to have helped them grow relatively, evolve to be larger animals. And they did the same thing the fishers did, in that first they colonized the wild areas, then they moved into the rural areas, and now they're starting to enter the cities. And I love this graphic. This is from the Walrus magazine, a nice artwork sort of showing how coyotes are starting to move into the cities. But unlike fishers, coyotes never got a break. This is a dead coyote in the back of some hunter's pickup outside of New York with their hounds. Hunters in rural areas hunt coyotes mercilessly. I went to one tournament where they killed 170 in one weekend. They hunt them in all sorts of different ways. Coyotes never got a break. I mean, in some ways, they're an invasive species. I mean, they're sort of recolonizing the area that the wolves are extinct from. But they have expanded despite this intense hunting and trapping pressure. And if we think about why would they move to the suburbs, there's the same abundance of rabbits, which they like to eat. But there's also a lot less hunting pressure in the suburbs. This graph shows the decline in the human-caused mortality in carnivores as you move from wild areas into cities. People don't hunt. You can't shoot a gun in the city. You can't run traps because you might catch a dog or a cat or a kid. And so if these animals can find their way into the city, they're going to have a lot less. You can see the mortality of some of these carnivores in rural areas caused by humans. 60, 80, 100% of the deaths are caused by people. So in North America, there's quite a lot of hunting pressure, and they can escape that if they move to the cities. The other interesting thing about coyotes is the difference between eastern and western coyotes. Western cities have had coyotes as long as they've been cities. Coyotes have had a longer time to adapt and evolve into urban specialists. And they are more highly adapted, and they're actually starting to cause some trouble. This headline on this newspaper from the Los Angeles Times says, "Coyote enters home and snatches dog near sleeping baby." It went in through an open window to grab a chihuahua. They really don't seem to like chihuahuas. But they are killing pets, and they are right in neighborhoods. I saw another news item where it scaled a 12-foot cement wall and killed someone's dog, a little sort of small lap dog in their backyard. This is problematic. And in the East Coast, we don't have nearly these types of problems, and we don't know if we will. Or this is a headline from DC that says coyote-wolf hybrids have invaded Washington. And so they're still kind of novel, but there are certainly, we ran camera traps in Rock Creek Park recently and had 123 coyote pictures. We only had one cat picture, right? There's a connection there. This is a picture of a California coyote carrying a cat through an underpass. And generally in our research, we found that where cats are rare, where coyotes roam. So what can we do if we didn't want them to be here? One thing we can do to reduce the risk is don't feed them. This is some coyotes right in someone's backyard. They've got their nose to the ground. They're eating some food that might have been let out for cats, might have been let out for coyotes or raccoons, who knows. But we don't want coyotes coming into house yards looking for food, because this is what is going to lead into more conflict. But past this, there's not a lot else we can do. So we should enjoy them. This is a beautiful black coyote from eastern North Carolina, probably has some dog genes mixed in. You can see his friend back there in the background with his eyes shining. These are beautiful animals, and we can't, like I said, we can't start trapping them. We can't start hunting them. We need to realize that these animals are here, and they're living in our urban areas, and they're not going away. And that there's a good side of predators. Think about, I mean, how many people have gotten their shoes all messed up from all the geese poop in the variety of urban parks, right? The balance of nature has gone askew by all these prey species moving into suburbia, doing quite well, and not having predators. And so the return of coyotes and fishers and other predators, it's not just coyotes and fishers. We have mountain lions in Colorado and California. We have recovery of wolves, not necessarily in cities yet, but wolves are recovering around the Great Lakes. There are many dozens of wolf packs in Germany. There's a wolf pack in Denmark now. The predators are moving back into cities. There's some remarkable footage recently of leopards moving into cities in India. So these species are adapting. Evolution is acting. The animals that survive and breed and pass their genes on are the ones that have the next generation. So what I've really told you today is two evolution tales. One about the fisher, where if we give them a chance, they can adapt and survive, right? We protected a population, let them build their population back up and have a lot of variation. Natural selection and evolution act on this variation, selecting the ones that can survive in the habitat. And this shows that we can make a difference. If we hadn't have protected the species, the fisher would have been gone for sure. Okay? And this is what we can do for other species that are suffering under unregulated persecution. But then there are other species like the coyote where it doesn't really matter what we do for the coyote. They are so adaptable and so flexible and so smart, and that they are making us realize that we are part of nature. When we're in cities, there are predators there, and we need to think about what we do, whether we let our cats outdoors, whether we let our toddlers play unattended in the backyard. They don't attack adult humans, but little kids could potentially be at risk, and there's really nothing we can do about it. And so I think we need to, recognize that we are part of nature. So I just want to end a little bit with some speculation about how far can evolution go. And this picture came to me from Cape Cod. It's a fisher on the beach. And if you think about fishers, as I learned about, were old growth specialists that needed overhead forest canopy, right? There isn't a tree in a long way from this. So I thought, well, this is the epitome. This is as far as it's going to go. And then I got this picture from the Bronx. Of a fisher. A police officer took this picture in 2014, and I thought, if these fishers can colonize the tubes and tunnels in New York and start eating rats, we could have a whole new species, a whole new specialist urban predator. And so I'll end with that. Thank you very much.